Hello and welcome to the Sci-Fi Fantasy Edition of Incoming, the video podcast that looks back at the week's miniature releases. This is episode 17, which looks back at miniature releases for week ending the 29th of January 2010. As always, I'm your host Neil Shuck. Well, apologies that this episode is slightly delayed. It's just had one of those weekends. It meant that I couldn't get the audio recorded over the weekend, but hopefully it's one of those things that's better late than never. A pretty busy week as far as sci-fi and fantasy releases are concerned. So quite a difficult decision to make a top 10. Hopefully we've got some interesting models for you. Okay, straight in at number 10. I gave these guys a hard time last week. This is Mantic. And here we have another one of their preview models. This is of their new Alvan General. And I like the sculpt on this, if only for the simple reason that it's not a typically heroic general sculpt. It's very much a case of a figure that's overlooking a battlefield and surveying how the battle is going, which is, as I say, a very different sort of look than you get for an awful lot of fantasy generals. So I like the approach from Mantic on this particular model. It's a nice sculpt as well. Lots of things going on. At number 9, my only release this week featured from Reaper. Reaper again have been very busy in their releases, and although there were a lot of them, a couple caught my eye. This was the only one that made my top 10. This is Zalash, the Dark Elf Assassin, sculpted by Bobby Jackson. The thing that struck me about this particular miniature is that although it's meant to be an elf, it almost looks insect-like. It's got like an insect-style quality to the way all the armour is sculpted, with the angular, spiny elbow and knee armour, and the way the helmet looks. It's not, to my mind, a typical Dark Elf. If anything, that's what actually made it stand out for me this week. As with most Reaper models, well detailed, well sculpted, looks really good. As I say, just a slightly offbeat sort of sculpt at the end of the day, which kind of appealed. At number 8, we have a release from Zenith Miniatures. This is from their Kingdom of God range, and this is Bodolfo, who appears to be some sort of cleric, warrior monk. Absolutely huge hammer, which actually looks more in place in something of Japanese or Chinese mythology. Strange figure this. It almost looks, dare I say, 40k Imperial like in some of the garb. At the same time, obviously a fantasy cleric. Well sculpted. A bloke with even more chins than me, which is some going. And generally a really interesting looking sculpt. Lots of little details and points of character. It's almost Friar Tuck-like in its sensibilities, isn't it? I mean, I do like the way that effectively it's converted a beer keg into a warhammer. A fun figure. And number 7, and one of several new releases this week from GZG Miniatures. They've released several new packs. This is my favourite of the lot. This is a set of grav bikes with new Israeli riders. Now hopefully these grav bikes will be available with other riders as well. But I really like this bike. It's completely functional, looks the part without being really over the top. I mean, we've seen some grav bikes over recent months that have been seriously over the top. Very kind of, big Japanese anime sort of things. This is much more kind of cut down and functional. Just appeals to my sensibilities. A nice sculpt from GZG. Number 6 this week, we have the first of a couple of new releases from Taban Miniatures for their Eden range. This isn't quite my favourite of the new figures that they're looking at for this range. This is Tukwila, who's from the Bloodfangs, and as you can see, he's kind of a very feral Wolverine-style figure. I mean, looking at the whole figure, it seems a little bit based on Hugh Jackman Wolverine. Just a little bit more OTT on the musculature. And certainly a very dynamic model. Very well sculpted, great detailing. Lots to get your painting teeth into. Number 5, and one of a couple of new releases this week from Trollforge Miniatures. We've had an Alien Stalker. This is more my favourite, which is an Alien Brain. Very much a cross between something out of H.R. Geiger and something from Games Workshop Tyranid range. Which in either case isn't necessarily a bad thing. The Geiger style of alien always appealed to me. It's one of my favourite movie creatures. So there are parts of this particular figure which are a great homage to that. And the rest, to say, look pure Tyranid. Interesting to see this with the release of the new Tyranid Codex. I suppose it could be used as a proxy or an alternative. A nice sculpt. And number 4, we have a new release from Heresy. Here we have a green of a guy called Tiny, who is a fat gang member with a rocket launcher. Now, Heresy have a series of these gang members, balding heads in long coats, very reminiscent of a GW Necromunda gang. And I must admit, although it's been a while since I played Necromunda, I'm very tempted to collect this series of miniatures for that particular purpose. Another great sculpt from Andy Foster, always produces consistently good models, which are always really good for your fantasy and sci-fi games. Yeah, I'd highly recommend this one to look out for. Number 3, and it's back to Taban Miniatures and the Eden range. This is Mamushi, and this is a new miniature for my favourite faction from Eden, the ISC, who you may remember are the large samurai robots. This is essentially a robotic snake, which in a lot of ways is a very strange looking miniature. But there's just something about it, it's the same with the other ISC figures, it just appeals to my particular sensibilities. So I really like this miniature, I think it's really great, and again, it's one of those things that it points me up and says, maybe I should really give Eden a go as one of the games to play this year. Very, very tempting if I can convince someone else to play one of the other factions. Number 2, and a new miniature from Studio McVey. Beautiful looking model this, and this is Pan. And well, almost enough said really, just cast your eyes over this gorgeous model. Fantastic sculpting and detailing, right down to the fairy in his hand and his feet. Quite simply a beautiful model. And a lot of weeks it may be my number 1, but my number 1 this week goes to another range from Infinity. Again, this is another game that the more I see of these models, the more I like them. More anime style sculpting. These are Akon Tekimento regulars. 3 different sculpts available as part of Infinity's new releases this week. Classic mid-tech sci-fi troopers. I'm always a huge fan of this sort of styling. And yet again, here we have figures that make you want to go out and buy them, make you want to go out and collect the game. And that's a lot of what I think a lot of these, especially skirmish games, are like. They've got to produce really good looking factions because they've got to be different because there are so many of them around. I think these figures again have really, as they produce that sort of wow factor, an excellent set of releases for the Infinity game. And there you have it, a really difficult choice this week. Lots and lots of really good stuff around. Whether it be several of the other new releases from the likes of Infinity, GZG, a couple of the other Reaper models. Yeah, a really good week. Very difficult to pick a top 10 in the end. But having said that, I hope you've seen something you like. And would you believe it? Another week without a dwarf. Well, that's all I've got time for this week. Just to say a quick thank you again to Zach from Tabletop Gaming News, Bill from the Miniatures page. Thanks to these guys for their fantastic blogs. And without them, this site simply wouldn't be possible. If you want to see this show again, then be sure to check out Warboots TV. And in the meantime, I'd just like to say a huge thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye.